The scribes' rebellion in ancient Babylon, 1700 years before Christ. Knowledge was power, but knowledge was controlled. Only scribes could read and write. Only scribes could record contracts, laws, transactions. The ability to write cuneiform wasn't just a skill, it was a monopoly, and like all monopolies, it was protected viciously. To become a scribe required years in expensive schools, required family connections, required money most people would never have. The scribe class controlled information, and they intended to keep it that way until one teacher decided the monopoly was strangling civilization itself. This is the story of a scribe who committed the ultimate betrayal. He taught outsiders to read. Meet Ashur-bel-nisheshu, 46 years old, a master scribe. He had trained in the Royal Scribe School for 12 years, mastered 3,000 cuneiform symbols, served in the palace recording Hammurabi's legal decisions. He was elite, respected, part of the knowledge aristocracy that controlled Babylon's information flow. He had everything a scribe could want: position, respect, guaranteed work. His children would inherit his status. His family would remain in the educated class forever. He had won the birth lottery, but something gnawed at him, a growing disgust at what he saw every day. He watched illiterate merchants sign contracts they couldn't read, trusting scribes to record terms honestly. Some scribes were honest, many weren't, changing terms slightly, adding hidden fees. Illiterate merchants had no way to verify, no way to protect themselves. He watched farmers bringing grain to royal warehouses, receiving clay receipts they couldn't read, trusting the symbols matched what they delivered. Some receipts were accurate, many weren't. Farmers were systematically cheated because they couldn't verify the simplest written record. He watched women widowed by their husbands' deaths, signing away property rights because they couldn't read inheritance documents, trusting lawyers who spoke in technical language and recorded whatever benefited themselves, legally, invisibly. Through the simple act of controlled literacy, the scribe monopoly enabled a vast, quiet, legal theft from the illiterate majority by the literate few, and Ashur-bel-nisheshu was part of it. He tried working within the system, suggested to the scribe guild that basic literacy should be taught more widely, that merchants should learn to read contracts, that farmers should verify receipts, that widespread inability to read was creating systemic corruption. The guild's response was immediate and hostile. You want to destroy our profession? If everyone can read, why do they need us? You're talking about professional suicide. Ashur-bel-nisheshu realized they were right, but not in the way they thought. Scribes were protected by artificial scarcity. They maintained high fees by ensuring most people remained illiterate. The profession's power depended on keeping knowledge rare. He was proposing to democratize information, to break the monopoly, to commit professional class suicide, and he found, to his own surprise, that he was willing to do exactly that. He started small. He opened a night school in a rented room in the artisan quarter. He announced he would teach basic cuneiform to anyone who wanted to learn. Not the full 3,000 symbols, just the essential 300, enough to read contracts, verify receipts, understand basic legal documents. The cost was minimal, whatever students could afford. Some paid in goods, some in labor, some paid nothing. He taught them all. His first students were unexpected. A 40-year-old merchant who had been cheated on contracts his entire career. A 38-year-old widow trying to understand her dead husband's debts. A 22-year-old laborer who wanted to verify the wage tablets his employer gave him. A 17-year-old girl whose father was a potter and couldn't afford scribe school but wanted to record his designs and techniques. None of them should have been learning to read. None could afford traditional scribe education. All were violating the unwritten rule that literacy was for the elite. Ashur-bel-nisheshu taught them anyway, starting with the simplest symbols, numbers first, then basic words, contract, grain, silver, debt, the vocabulary of survival in a literate world. The transformation was immediate. The merchant read his next contract, found a hidden clause that would have cost him 20% of profits, confronted the scribe who'd written it. The scribe, shocked that his fraud had been detected, removed the clause. The merchant had protected himself through simple literacy. The widow read her inheritance documents, discovered her lawyer had listed properties as disputed that were actually hers outright, confronted him. He changed the documents. She kept her property. The laborer read his wage tablets, found he'd been shorted today's pay every month for 3 years, brought evidence to a magistrate, was compensated. His literacy had recovered stolen wages. Word spread, more students came, the night school expanded. Ashur-bel-nisheshu trained assistant teachers, former students who had mastered basic literacy and wanted to teach others. The school grew from 1 room to 3, from 10 students to 50, from a quiet experiment to a movement. The scribe guild noticed, and they were not pleased. They sent representatives, professional, polite, with a clear message: stop teaching, this ends now or face consequences. Ashur-bel-nisheshu refused. People have a right to read their own contracts, to verify their own records. Literacy shouldn't be a class privilege. The guild's response escalated. They filed complaints with city authorities, argued that unlicensed teaching violated professional regulations, that allowing unqualified people to read contracts created legal confusion, that the scribe monopoly existed for quality control, not profit. But Hammurabi himself heard about the dispute, the king who had created the first comprehensive legal code, the king who wanted laws to be known and followed. He summoned Ashur-bel-nisheshu and guild representatives to court. The guild argued their case. Scribe training took years, required mastery of complex symbols, ensuring literacy quality protected the public from misunderstanding important documents. The monopoly served society. Ashur-bel-nisheshu argued differently. The monopoly protects scribes, not the public. I'm not training people to be professional scribes. I'm teaching basic literacy, the ability to read their own contracts, verify their own receipts, protect themselves from fraud that flourishes in darkness. Then he presented evidence. Students testified, showed contracts they'd caught fraud in, receipts they'd verified, documents they'd understood. Concrete examples of how basic literacy protected them from exploitation that had been happening for generations. Hammurabi asked the guild a direct question: is the primary purpose of limiting literacy to maintain professional standards or to maintain professional income? The guild couldn't answer honestly without admitting corruption, couldn't lie convincingly when evidence of systematic fraud was obvious. Hammurabi issued a ruling that transformed Babylonian society. Basic literacy education was declared legal. Anyone could teach, anyone could learn. The scribe guild maintained control over professional certification for complex legal work. But basic literacy enough to read contracts and verify records was no longer their monopoly. The guild was furious. They expelled Ashur-bel-nisheshu from their ranks, declared him a traitor to his profession, ostracized him socially. He lost access to elite scribal work, lost his position in the palace, lost the professional status he'd spent decades building. But his school thrived. More students came, other teachers opened similar schools. Within 5 years, basic literacy in Babylon's artisan and merchant classes went from rare to common. Within 10 years, contracts became simpler and more honest because merchants could read them. Fraud became harder because verification became possible. The unexpected consequence was economic growth with reduced fraud and clearer contracts. Trade became more efficient. Merchants from other cities preferred trading with Babylonian merchants who could read and verify agreements. Trust increased, commerce expanded. The scribe profession didn't die, it evolved. Professional scribes focused on complex legal work, specialized documentation, artistic calligraphy, work that required true expertise. The simple recording work disappeared as people could do it themselves, but the profession actually became more respected because it focused on genuine skill rather than artificial scarcity. Ashur-bel-nisheshu never regained his elite status. He lived modestly, taught until he was 73, trained hundreds of students who trained thousands more. He died neither wealthy nor honored by his original profession, but his students honored him: the merchant who had caught contract fraud, the widow who had saved her property, the laborer who had recovered stolen wages. They remembered the teacher who gave them power by giving them knowledge. His fundamental insight was simple but revolutionary. Knowledge isn't diminished by sharing. Power based on artificial scarcity is power built on exploitation. True expertise doesn't need monopoly protection, and the greatest service a teacher can provide is making themselves unnecessary. Today, archaeologists find evidence of increasing literacy. In ancient Babylon, more people signing their own names on contracts, more personal letters, more evidence that knowledge was spreading beyond the elite class. The democratization of literacy that began with one teacher's rebellion. Ashur-bel-nisheshu understood something that threatened the powerful, that information wants to spread, that monopolies on knowledge are always temporary, that the question isn't whether knowledge will democratize, but whether those who control it will guide that democratization or be destroyed by resisting it. He chose to guide it, and in doing so, committed professional suicide, but achieved something greater. He proved that true education isn't about protecting the educated. It's about expanding the circle of those who can protect themselves. The scribes' rebellion succeeded, not by destroying the profession, but by transforming it, by proving that expertise based on genuine skill is stronger than privilege based on artificial scarcity. Knowledge is power, but hoarded. Knowledge is a weapon turned on the powerless. Shared knowledge is a tool that builds civilization itself. The scribes' rebellion, silent Babylon, where ancient civilizations speak.